Thank you, Julie. And Amy, thank you very much for that presentation. I took a lot of notes and really appreciated one of the comments you made about sharing exclusive information and how that builds relationships. So that really resonated. Like Julie said, we were identifying state policy experts to better serve our membership. We regularly get inquiries about issues that are percolating in the state level. So to build a mechanism to convey and share this information with the membership and the equine community, we are convening a panel of 6 horsemen and women who will share insights into major developments in their respective state capitals. Each panelist will take up to 10 minutes to talk about issues moving in his or her state. If anyone has a question for a panelist, please type it into the chat box and we will address those during the Q&A portion, and that will be at the end of the program. Please note that the panelists are sharing their own perspectives on state policy. Their presentations are for educational and discussion purposes only. They do not necessarily reflect an actual or tacit endorsement from the American Horse Council. For a complete list of the presenters, Julie, if we could just show the slide that lists everyone that's going to be participating, please refer to the information that we'll throw up on the screen. And as we go through the presentations, I will do a quick introduction of the speakers as we move through the panel. So with that, first up, I'm going to present Mr. Lonnie Powell. He serves as the CEO of the Florida Breeders and Owners Association. In addition to holding a variety of roles in the equine community, Lonnie has served in the cabinet of Governor Jan Brewer of Arizona. Today, he's going to share insights into a recent session in Tallahassee, focusing on gaming issues. So with that, Lonnie, I see you're in the queue there. I'll hand things over to you to talk about your adventures in Tallahassee.
Thank you very much, Brian, for the kind introduction. Good morning, everybody. Kudos to the American Horse Council for putting this forum together. In all the organizations that I've overseen over the past 30, 40 years, have all belonged to the Horse Council. And it's a very important organization. We appreciate the good work it does. But I do have to say, one of my ongoing frustrations, because nothing's perfect, has been the Horse Council's disconnect with state legislative issues. And I'm very encouraged to see the leadership of the Horse Council, including state legislative issues with the conference. That's good work, folks. I also have to endorse Amy's presentation was so spot on. It would take me forever to talk about all the parts I agreed with, but I think that should be required reading, including from some people in our industry that consider themselves to be veterans in the lobbying process, because there's a lot of basics there that people don't cover. I'm welcoming you or greeting you from the horse capital of the world, Ocala, Florida, within Marion County, Florida, in Central Florida. Not only is that phrase trademarked by my organization, but our county does have, in terms of a single county, the highest population of equines of all breeds in the country. Horses are big business in Florida. And I tell you this for 2 things as I go on with my other comments, because as Brian alluded to, I'm coming literally with the fresh dirt, or if you want to call it manure, on my shoes from a legislative session that just ended 2 weeks ago, and have been pretty engaged since January in particular on legislative matters. So I'll tell you a couple things about Florida, which should show you 2 different things. One, they ended up helping at least my organization get through what we needed to do. But it also shows if a state like ours can be up against these challenges, really nobody is immune. In fact, everybody in somehow, some way will be dealing with similar issues. And I'll get to those in just a second. First of all, when it comes to our state, we're the 3rd most populous state in horses. We have about 400,000 horses, according to Horse Council. 1 in every 4 horses is a thoroughbred. When it comes to thoroughbred breeding, we're the top 3 producer in North America. And our racing is top here nationally, obviously. Whether you look at all breeds or just the thoroughbreds, it's a multi-billion-dollar economic impact to our state. Even when you drill down to the thoroughbreds, our tens and thousands of jobs and our economic impact. makes us larger than the state's professional baseball spring training industry, which, as many of you know, is a very important thing in Florida. So it gives us a good calling card, but also it shows you that an industry like this still has to dig in and fight and do the types of things that you heard from Amy. I won't be able to talk about, I'm going to be talking pretty much about pari-mutuel, so it's going to be about the standardbreds, quarter horses, and obviously the thoroughbreds. I can't go without making a quick comment, though, that can't get into it today, but obviously our state is going through a massive growth in terms of competition, show and contest, with all kinds of new facilities, all kinds of interest, and we've obviously always been a big pleasure in recreational riding state. But let's keep it to the pari-mutuels. And pari-mutuels, we from the thoroughbred standpoint, from my breed standpoint, we have two racetracks. We have Gulfstream in greater Miami area. That's our flagship track. We have Tampa Bay Downs. We no longer have Calder as of this year. They've been phasing out for some time. The Churchill Downs owned facility first leased its dates to Gulfstream. Then it became a highlight, and a big driving factor in that was so that purse money, Breeders' Awards money, and investment in facilities wouldn't have to happen. It was a corporate decision for corporate reasons. The one thing that has become very interesting in our state is both tracks rely significantly, I know this is going on in California as well, for state breds in order to make their racing programs go. State breds, in our case in Florida, Florida breds are winning over a third of the races. And of those winners, about 70% of them are sired by Florida sires. So that's even during the Gulfstream championship meet. So our state breds, fortunately, have become very much in demand, and it's nice to be in demand. As far as our post-COVID economics, we were one of the states that was able to remain open, though not to the public. Our racing signals continued, and between Tampa and Gulfstream, we were able to have some huge simulcast and ADW numbers where they actually made a difference. And that led to multiple purse increases at the racetracks in the past year. And just last week, my organization announced increasing Breeders' and Stallion Awards back up to pre-pandemic levels and retroing those payments all the way back to January 1 of this year. So we were fortunate in terms of as an industry and coming out of the pandemic okay. We do have two other breeds that were less fortunate. We have the standardbreds and we have the quarter horses. Standardbreds typically run at Pompano Park or Isle of Capri in the Miami area. Quarter horses run it anywhere from historic Hialeah to other places. And that would be our pari-mutuel mix. Greyhound racing was voted down by the public for humane reasons years ago, so there is no greyhound racing. Our legislative session this year was a March-April session. In the backdrop, for those of us in the pari-mutuel and gaming industry in Florida, we knew that there was a chance that the Seminole Gaming Compact would successfully be negotiated after failed attempts in past years. The Seminole tribe is arguably one of the most powerful gaming tribes in the world. They have two huge facilities here in Florida, and they are the gaming giant. And obviously the state was looking for some revenue. What really drove the whole session then was this compact, whether it would be successfully negotiated or not. And towards the end of the regular session, it was successfully negotiated by the governor and the president of the Senate, but there was not time to get full legislative approval. Hence, a special session was called 2 weeks later. It was 1 week, and the only focus was gaming, which in our state, like probably a lot of the states, that means anything possible that's gambling related, including pari-mutuels. We're always lumped together with casinos in Florida. We were all going to go into the room with our chainsaws and have to go after each other in order to see the survival of the fittest on how this thing might work. In addition to the compact ratification piece of legislation, there was another piece of legislation that would create a gaming commission. It successfully passed. And ironically, it regulates everything but tribal gaming. And then there was a pari-mutuel bill, which caused some of the controversy. It did two things. It decoupled almost all horses from a gaming activity. For example, if you had a racino in your state, your track ownership could decide just to operate slot machines, keep the money, and not have racing and pay no breeders' awards and no no purses. Similar to what Calder did. Then there was Florida had 10 non-active racing permits that could be activated. We owned one of them, and those 10 permits were in the package too. So the bottom line was, when back in January, when we first started our work and first started Zooming, because that's the only way you could meet with legislators back then. And by the way, a lot of our leadership had COVID at the time. As we were visiting, we realized early on in January that the draft language was going to decouple all breeds, including thoroughbreds, and it was going to eliminate all inactive permits, including our own. So that was our starting point. Now, obviously, there's a whole bunch of guts there in the middle I'm not going to get to because it would take too long, and maybe there'll be time for questions. But from that starting point in January of us being decoupled and losing our racing permit, which is a safety net that we would only activate in case live racing, in our opinion, got too low in the state. By the time we got through the May special session, we came out with thoroughbreds being the only breed to remain coupled. And our racing permit was the only one of 10 to have survived. It wasn't easy getting there. It wasn't fun getting there. It wasn't a bunch of love and joy all the way in getting there. But from a thoroughbred owner and breeder standpoint, we did what we needed to do. And in fact, I'll pull an Amy term, that was a David versus Goliath. And sometimes David does succeed. That doesn't mean that everybody was happy. Because of the compact itself, the racetracks in particular were not happy with elements of the compact, which was negotiated separately between the governor and the president of the Senate. And we understand why they would be unhappy with some of the provisions, though they get some benefits. Time will tell if the sports wagering component, the way it's structured, will be lucrative for pari-mutuels. Gulfstream gets some night racing, but the Seminole tribe gets to expand facilities on their property, and there's a lot of other things going on. So it wasn't one that if you were a racetrack or anybody in the pari-mutuel industry, you'd be ecstatic about. But what got worse was when it came to the legislation, the harness and quarter horse people did get decoupled. So by 12 months from now, by the end of 12 months from now, there will not be any harness racing. There will not be any quarter horse racing in Florida, nor will they ever come back. They will be gone forever. And Brian talks about the disclaimers of the different speakers. That's good, because I'm going to say that I believe these standard bred and quarter horse people were sold out by the racetracks, and or the type of racing they were forced to compromise themselves to perform, whether it be the quarter horses running around barrels or loping in match races, or the harness track never wanting the product that they were offering. That was very unfortunate. Why the difference between breeds at the end of the day? Well, I think ultimately, the thoroughbreds were the larger part of the pari-mutuel sector by far. I got to give a shout out to the American Horse Council for all their economic impact studies and data. We use that like gospel. This card you see here, on one side it's Florida, the Florida thoroughbred industry. On the other side, it's Florida equine industry. It's got all the main data from the Horse Council Economic Impact Study. It's our Bible. We have educated the legislators with that for years. And in fact, we have them reciting it back to us. It was really key. Unfortunately, the information was not nearly as strong for harness and for a quarter horse. Also, it's all about relationships. I'm a relationship guy. Every company I run is a relationship company. And as Amy said, we don't just show up and talk to legislators when we have a problem. That's not a relationship. That's going and whining to the parents and hoping that they'll bail you out. So we're big on relationships. Relationships are a two-way street. We had the awareness. We had the history. I mean, we've had I don't know, 30 some national champions, next to Kentucky, nobody's had more triple crown jewel winners, more national champions, more Breeders' Cup winners than us. And that has some staying power and does resonate within the people of Florida. It gives us a national status, if you will. Strategy, we went in, my belief is you don't go in with one strategy, you go in with a strategy and all kinds of hybrids. And so we had multiple strategies we could pivot to during the regular session and the special session in order to try to get our job done. And then finally, what I would just say, at least coming from our end, we just won't be outworked. FTBOA will never be outworked on any issue. We could be out-resourced, but we won't be outworked. And every company I've run, that's just kind of our motto. We won't be outworked. And I've been overseeing government affairs as part of being a CEO for almost 30 some years now. And we just won't be overworked. We won't be outworked when it comes to this type of thing. Going forward, at least from our end and the Florida Thoroughbred end, we know we can't let our guard down. We even stop and savor a little bit of our David versus Goliath moment. In fact, I'll tell you, the day after special session, my lead Tallahassee-based lobbyist, myself, started working on language already for the next session. We're already planning our strategies, and we're going to make it a top priority to do everything we can to bring economic reward to the racetracks and recognition of the important role they play with their live racing to our overall industry. When it comes to, in summary, I guess a couple of the comments I'd make, and Amy has said some of this, but I think for everyone involved in the pari-mutuel industry, no matter what breed you are, and it might apply to some of the other disciplines, I think you need to prepare yourself to answer the question, and it's coming sooner versus later. And that is it ever appropriate for horse people, and I'm thinking primarily owners, breeders, and trainers here, is it ever appropriate for horse people to back away from the need of live racing? Is it ever okay for horse people to say, you know, we don't care if the racinos have racing or not, let the racinos do what works best for them? Is it ever okay to have your share of gaming revenues cut because they can be? Or is it ever in your best interest to accept an ADW deal that is absolutely an insult because it does not reward the horseman effectively? If you and your organization are ready to respond to those, you're way ahead of the game. But you got to respond with clear answers. And you have to be prepared to do it, as was the case here in Florida. If you're the lone voice in your entire industry that's advocating for live racing. Really, to me, the question for the pari-mutuel horse breeds in all the states needs to be, you got to ask yourselves, how much live racing do you, the horsemen, do the breeders, and yes, even the racetracks, do you need in order to keep your respective breeds and your stakeholders stable and viable? That really is the question. And as horse people, I think we're going to find ourselves stepping out more on point, more on the lead, and in many cases needing to be the voice of common sense and reason as we deal with this vast array of challenges. That would complete my comments, Brian. And I know we've got lots of other great speakers on board, so I look forward to hearing from them as well, and I'll take questions at the end when everybody else does. And I thank you all for your attention.
Great, thank you, Lonnie. That's a very helpful report from definitely one of our most important equine states. And I already do have a couple of questions in the queue for you, so if you could stand by as we go through the other panelists, that'd be great. So next on board, we have Jean Ligon, and she serves as president of Michigan Horse Council. Today, Jean will talk about details surrounding the outcome of a trails dispute that arose in Michigan's Upper Peninsula. All right, Jean, please let us know what's going on in the great state of Michigan. The floor is all yours. And Jean, you're still on mute. There we go.
There we go. Now can you hear me all right?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. I'm happy to be with you today, of course, and I want to mention before going into my happy tale that we have seen at the States so much positive response from you, Brian. You always respond to our calls, and we appreciate the Horse Council's willingness to take on state issues and talk to us about state issues. It's very much appreciated. So this story comes to you from above the bridge, meaning the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. And it's about the Upper Peninsula's signature equestrian trail, which is the Grand Island Bay de Noc Trail. The Grand Island Trail is a linear trail about 40 miles long that was originally used by the Algonquin tribe of Native Americans. It's located within the Hiawatha National Forest and is the venue for 2 endurance rides, and it's also underutilized by horse people and terribly neglected by the Forest Service. At least that has been its history. It is underutilized because it's a linear trail, and the nature of linear trails makes it hard to use. One has to ride out and at some arbitrary point turn around and ride back the same way, which no one likes to do. Plus, there are only 2 places to water, one of which is the Hay Meadow Creek crossing. In 2014, however, the Forest Service decided to improve the Haymarket Creek crossing. The creek lies in a fairly steep gorge, and the water bars, which had been protected the southern approach for decades, had been heaved out of place by an especially bad spring breakup. Instead of investigating what would work for horses, they built an above-the-ground spiral staircase that was unsafe and even unusable by horses. It was basically a series of boxes filled with pea gravel that featured step downs up to 18 inches and landings spaced so closely that a horse would not be able to have all 4 feet on one landing before having to take another step down. The Forest Service eventually acknowledged their error with a sign saying the stairway was not recommended for horses, and posting a detour of 3 miles that took riders out on a paved road frequented by logging trucks, and of course, depriving the horses of one of its 2 critical sources of water on this trail. Years went by after 2014 with riders detouring around the Haymarket Creek, which of course made the trail that much less appealing to riders. And it became obvious that the Forest Service was never going to change and remedy the situation. So on the stage appears Karen Barman. She is an equestrian who lives in the area and rode the Grand Island Bay de Noc Trail in the Hiawatha Forest. She started applying for grants to have an equine trail builder visit the site and develop a plan to re-engineer the crossing in a horse-friendly way. But she was turned down by several organizations in 2017 and 2018, both, including by AERC, the American Endurance Ride Conference, because there was no guarantee that the Forest Service would approve such a plan. In the spring of 2019, however, Karen tried again with a grant application to the Michigan Horse Council to fund a re-engineering plan for the creek crossing to make it horse-friendly once again. The situation had become particularly urgent due to non-motorized, think mountain bikes, group taking an unhealthy interest in the Grand Island Trail, given its underuse by horse people. Because the Grand Island Trail is clearly not designed for and would not be safe for shared use. It's a single track trail with blind curves and so on. Mountain bikers have 624 miles of trails in the Upper Peninsula, compared to equestrians less than 100 miles. The Forest Service's official position was that while non-motorized trails on federal land are managed for specific uses, they remain open to all such uses. And at the time, the specter of mountain bikers swooping down with their money to fix Haymarket Creek, Haymeadow Creek, after which they would obviously feel more entitled to use that trail, focused a lot of attention on the trail and its problems. And long story short, the Michigan Horse Council decided to take a chance on Karen and her UP trail riding callings with a grant of $3,500 for the Trailmaster's site visit and plan. The site visit was done by Mike Ryder. He made a site visit in June and submitted the plan a few weeks later with a price quote of about $11,000. And Karen nagged the Forest Service into approving the plan, reapplied for an AERC grant, this time to implement the plan, and also started a GoFundMe page, which initially didn't draw very many contributors, probably because people were reluctant to donate to a project so contingent on others donating, and the idea that horse people should have to pay to fix a mistake made by the government with public money. And that's always a hard sell. As time went on, it became apparent that although the AERC would probably be a funder of this project, it wouldn't come in time to meet the project schedule. So, like the Michigan Horse Council, Karen made a leap of faith and guaranteed payment herself personally. The project thus went forward. It involves several hundred yards of rerouted trail and a ramp to the creek hardened by interlocking grassy pavers buried under a gravel mix and compacted. It took about a week to complete. News that the project was actually underway helped with the fundraising, however, and people started donating in earnest, both to the GoFundMe page and also just directly. A local saddle club brought it over the finish line with a $1,000 donation, and there was a little more than $100 to spare, which they spent on a sign thanking all the donors. Horse people, it seems to me, have been slow to adopt the new reality that land managers expect user groups to pony up the money and the labor to maintain old horse trails and build new trails. Hikers and mountain bikers are way ahead of us in this regard. One outgrowth of the Haymarket Creek crossing problems was a new volunteer service agreement between the Forest Service and horsemen using the Grand Island Trail. We need more of these agreements between federal land managers and trail riders, not more complaining about the government's failure to maintain horse trails. Although my understanding is that the new Forest Service policy is that all non-motorized users can use all non-motorized trails on federal land, the reality is something different. The reality today is that trail riders often have the short end of that stick. They're forced to let bikers and other incompatible user groups on traditional horse trails, while horses are not permitted on the biking, cross-country skiing, and other similar trails. This is a problem that needs to be fully appreciated and resolved, but that is a tale for another day. When confronted with trail issues that affects more than one user group, remember that the best results are achieved best if horse people are organized, on point, open and honest, yet tactful when dealing with the other. That was certainly the case with the Haymarket Creek crossing discussions between user groups. And this approach by horsemen at the table resulted in hikers and mountain bikers not only understanding the problem, but supporting the resolution, which was a re-engineered horse-friendly crossing. The takeaway from this is twofold. One, understand that the maintenance and development of horse trails in this country is on us. Two, think about what you spend on horses and on tack and trailers and feeds and supplements and vets and farriers and so on. And ask yourself, what good will any of this be when there are no trails to ride? I was interested in the last speaker's comment about the percent of horses uh, in his region. And I am on a planning commission here in my local township. And we did a survey of our township several years ago. And what we discovered in a township that hadn't considered itself horsey at all was that 1 in every 10 residents was a horse. We need to keep that in mind when we're thinking about what is our power to bring change with respect to some of these issues. If you are leery of donating to local horse projects, trail projects, then donate to the organizations that provide the grants. Better, do both. Donate to your state horse council. Donate to the AERC Trail Fund. And not just the $25 that you may occasionally donate to match your renewal of dues. Donate your dues. Whatever you pay in dues, double that as much as you can for trails projects. They will be put to good use. Just look at Hay Meadow Creek now. And persistence. Did I mention persistence? Wonderful resolution at Haymarket Creek didn't happen on a first ask, nor the second. It happened on the third run at the problem, and it involved many meetings attended by many horse people who conducted themselves with the proper attitude. Michigan Horse Council sent its president all the way from Ann Arbor to the Upper Peninsula to attend one of those meetings. And there was also letter writing in support from both the Michigan Horse Council and many others. Persistence. Don't forget persistence. Thank you. That's it, Brian. That's my story.
All right, Jean, thank you very much for sharing your success stories up in Michigan. It's very helpful. So next up, we'll talk to Scott Durenkamp, who works as a livestock program and government relations manager at the Professional Rodeo Cowboys Association. He will share insights into Colorado's Proposition 16. Thank you, Scott, for joining us today. Again, the forum is all yours.
All right, thanks, Brian. Proposition 16 is basically known as the Pause Ballot Initiative, and it's Wilbur's Law. That's what they used to call it back in the day. It was introduced by two men from Boulder. The difference in this is it's not a brand new law. It is an amendment to an existing law. So there is no requirement in the state of Colorado for gathering 2% of the eligible voter signatures in each Senate district. They can get all of the 200 and some odd thousand signatures from Boulder or Denver, which they can do that in a day if need be. Right now, from everything I've been told, and we've been keeping an eye on this, the Colorado Farm Bureau is leading the fight against it. We've been in front of the title board twice to fight that this ballot initiative is not a single issue, that it's more than one. The title board turned that appeal down twice, so now it is in front of the Colorado Supreme Court. I am going to try to share my screen and show you the exact ballot initiative if I can. Can everybody see that right there? This
If
is
we can,
the
Scott, thank you.
awesome. This is the actual ballot initiative that is in front. If it gets approved, if the Colorado State Supreme Court does not turn this down, this will go in front of the voters in 2022. If this passes, it will be devastating to agriculture, not just horse people. It will devastate a $5 billion industry. They go through, first thing is they go through and define what a non-human creature is. Then the next thing that they do is the natural lifespan. Where they got these numbers is beyond me, but these are examples. Cows, natural lifespan is 20 years, chicken 8, turkey 10, duck 6, pig 15, sheep 15, rabbit 6. Then this will come back up in a minute. Then they talk about sexual act with an animal. This paragraph right here, for all intents and purposes, will outlaw semen collection and AIing. It not only affects horses and cattle and sheep, but there are 4 trout species that the Department of Wildlife has been working with, trying to get them off of the threatened list that this will affect. And one of the things that caught my eye is right here. It says a sexual act with an animal may be proven without allegation or proof of penetration. I have no idea how you are guilty of something without proof or allegation, but there you go. Nothing in this part shall affect the extermination of undesirable pests. Here is another one. This paragraph 2 right here. This will control. This will be the controlling statute for all other laws, no matter what the other ones say. This is bad, people. I hate to keep harping on it, but it is. And basically, this, from what I can see, this would outlaw horse pulling contests. I mean, it all sounds fine and good, but then you have to talk about who gets to define what each of these is. And then here comes the big one. This one right here. Any person who slaughters livestock in accordance with accepted agricultural animal husbandry practices does not violate the provisions of this subsection of this, or of subsection 1 of this section, so long as the animal has lived 1/4 of their natural lifespan. Well, it was brought up at a meeting that I attended about a month ago. If cattle have to live if cattle's natural lifespan is 20, and they're going to have to live 1/4 of their natural lifespan, which is 5, going back to when the I'm trying to think what mad cow disease happened. It was made where you could not slaughter cattle once they were past 30 months. So this is in direct contradiction to that, if that is correct. But that right there is going to devastate the whole entire ag industry in Colorado. You won't be able to AI horses, and whether you agree with a horse slaughter or not, it's going to devastate all of agriculture, the farmers, the feedlots, the packing plants, and it's not just cattle packing plants. We have a bunch of hog and sheep packing plants in Colorado also. And again, it's Wilbur's Law. Then they go through and they start defining who exactly gets to do things and who exactly does not. So again, I was going to be short and sweet on this. The Farm Bureau is leading the fight. It's in litigation in front of the Colorado Supreme Court. We're seeing if we can get it thrown out. This is not just a Colorado. This is not just a Colorado issue. This same bill is being introduced as a ballot initiative in Oregon also, and it is the Colorado bill on steroids. So these are bad. And one of the things I'm going to say, and I know I'm supposed to just talk about this, the ballot initiative, but one of the things I've seen in the last 6 months is that the activists who introduce these types of bills are no longer going after just specific events like tie down roping. They are after all of it. They're after everybody. And with that, I will stop. Thanks.
Great. Scott, thank you very much for raising the red flags that are out there in Colorado. Sounds like it might be spreading like wildfire, so we'll definitely have to keep this on tap. All right, so next up, we're happy to be joined by Mary Catagnani and Mary Sells, who have their fingerprints on the pulse of events taking place in West Virginia. Maria works as the executive director of the Charlestown Horsemen's Benevolent and Protective Association. Her fellow mountaineer, Mary Sell, owns and operates Takaro Farm. Team West Virginia will talk about coming back to the racetrack after COVID. They will also discuss outreach to their state delegation on a federal trails issue. This will show us how states can have an impact at the federal level. So thank you, Team West Virginia, for joining us, and the forum is yours. Take it away.
Thanks, Brian, for having us. And we're thrilled to be able to talk about statewide issues in West Virginia. The Charlestown HBPA is a 501c6 nonprofit trade association that represents about 2,500 owners and trainers who train and race their thoroughbred horses at Hollywood Casino at Charlestown races. And we run year-round, 12 months out of the year. When the governor ordered casinos in West Virginia to be shut down, there was some confusion for the owners and trainers as to how it affected the racing sector of the property. In addition to the casino, there were over 1,200 stalls on the ground, and in March 2020, most of them were filled with horses that were racing or were in training. There was no way we could ship all of those horses out of the track to existing farms, and the horse needed care and activity. They just couldn't stand in the stalls, as you all know, and they need to be exercised, fed, and watered daily. We're very thankful to West Virginia Governor Jim Justice and the West Virginia Department of Agriculture Commissioner Kent Leonhardt, whose staff immediately went to work with us to determine that because of the agricultural nature of racing, individuals who work with the horses at the racetrack would be designated as essential employees. So racing was shut down, but the horses were permitted to stay on the grounds and training continued. The HBPA and track management partnered to determine safety protocols to mitigate the threat of virus transmission while allowing individuals to work safely. Because nearly all HCCTR employees were laid off, we negotiated an agreement with track management whereby the HBPA paid wages for a very small crew of track maintenance and security staff, so horsemen could continue to train on the racetrack, although it was abbreviated training hours and limited the access to the stable area. After almost 2 months of training with no racing, revenue streams for the purse fund, as well as income for the horsemen and the HBPA, were negatively impacted. The CTHBPA ramped up its public outreach to secure donations in the way of grants and product to provide nearly 30 tons of feed and feed supplements to the horsemen. And we're especially grateful to the Thoroughbred Charities of America Horses First Fund and Triple Crown Feed, both of which were especially generous in their donations to ensure that horses received grain and feed, which was as much a morale boost as it was a financial boost for the trainers. We also created a secondary food bank to feed horsemen to supplement our primary food bank that we have through the racetrack chaplaincy. Thankfully, throughout the limitations of COVID, the HBPA staff of 2 remained employed, and subsequently, we've been eligible to qualify for an economic injury disaster loan grant and payroll protection plan for the first and second draw, as well as employee retention credits and the targeted advance for small business. Our office became a resource for horsemen regarding federal relief programs that are available to them. While we did not qualify for a shuttered venue grant, Part of the reason was because we had already applied for payroll protection funds, rounds 1 and 2. In mid-May, we were permitted to resume spectatorless racing. I have to admit, it was odd not to have fans at the racetrack, but everyone was thrilled to resume live racing and the ability to generate income. However, with the casino remaining closed, there were no additional funds going into the purse account. Once we resumed racing, funds in the purse fund began to decrease. However, because there were so few sports available in the wagering public, there was an uptick in our pari-mutuel wagering. And in June 2020, when the casino reopened with limited attendance and hours, the loss of revenue in the purse account continued, but to a much lesser degree. Overall, we've adapted well to the abbreviated work hours at the track, the masks, and the temperature taking. The horsemen are a tough and resilient group, and through it all, we supported each other, living up to the HBPA motto of horsemen helping horsemen. A lot of us went through this experience with the ability to continue earning a livelihood while others lost their jobs due to diminished revenue. Horsemen and track management have laid off about 1/3 of their employees, and getting back to normal is difficult due to the inability to find qualified people to come to work. Training and access to the stable area are still not what it used to be pre-COVID. Getting back to normal continues to be a slow progression. With respect to breeding, any instability negatively impacts the breeding industry. The biggest issues here continue to be how labor-intensive breeding is and the inability to find people to work. From a legislative perspective, we've been engaged on the state and federal levels. And as Lonnie Powell described, virtual meetings did not limit our ability to communicate with legislators. However, our lobbyists actually found it very difficult to move any legislation this year due to the concern about COVID legislation and tax legislation that was taking precedence in our state legislature. We did, however, have some success with an annual event that we do that's called the Women in Racing Legislative Presentation. We did that in a Zoom format, and it was very successful. Currently, on the state level, there are two thoroughbred racetracks in West Virginia. One is in Charlestown and the other is in Chester, West Virginia. So the two HBPAs are working with the Office of the Commissioner of Agriculture to invite members of the equine industry to a luncheon at the 2020 West Virginia State Fair in an effort to establish a West Virginia Horse Industry Coalition to actively promote the equine industry in the state of West Virginia. To recognize the importance as an economic contributor and vital component of the agricultural industry. The purpose of the Horse Coalition will be to raise awareness for horse-related activities in the state and their contribution to the economic and tourism components of the state, to serve in an advisory capacity to the Secretary of Agriculture regarding the industry needs, and to provide census taking and economic feasibility and contribution studies for legislative matters and education. An example of the kind of organization we'd hope to promote is the newly formed West Virginia Trails. The mission of West Virginia Trails is to develop a vibrant, engaged, and effective network of trail advocates, users, managers, business decision makers, in order to advance trails of all kinds throughout the state and thereby positively affect West Virginia's communities, their economies, and their health. This organization embraces a network of recreational users that includes but is not limited to horse trail riding, hiking, and biking. While this organization is not solely equine specific across the state of West Virginia, there are organizations like West Virginia Trails where horses are a significant economic driver that supports tourism and generates valuable economic impact to their communities. And if you're interested in learning more about the coalition or joining us at the luncheon at the state fair, please email us at info@cthbpa. I'd like to say that we are as far well advanced and developed as maybe a state like Florida or Michigan in terms of having a really strong horse coalition. We don't have that in West Virginia right now, and that's the goal, to try and get us to a point where we can all work together and we can advocate for policy and strategies that will help the equine industry in West Virginia.
I want to just jump in and add one thing about the luncheon. The luncheon is also with the two HPPAs. It also includes the West Virginia Racing United, which is an entity that has Mountaineer HPPA, Charlestown's HPPA, the West Virginia Thoroughbred Breeders Association, and the Jockeys Guild. And Maria is right. We are look at Florida model. And one thing about our state is we're located in a tri-state area with Virginia racing, Maryland racing, and Pennsylvania racing, and there's a lot of tracks near us. But for us in our state legislative affairs, we are two counties that are located in the northern panhandle and the eastern panhandle. We are far 5 hours from the state capital. We are blessed with having the state minority, the House Majority Leader is from a family of horsemen, and we have strong representation there. And we are a very agricultural, Charlestown, very agricultural county, and the equine industry is appreciated here for our hay and straw and feed. But we need to leverage our influence across the state, which is the reason for working with the coalition. And we want to thank Brian for bringing us in and connecting us with Nathan and the trails. So thank you very much. We look forward to working with you more in the future.
Team West Virginia, that was a great presentation. Thank you very much. If you can stick around, we've got a couple of questions for you in the queue. And next up, I'd like to introduce John Moss. He works as the executive director of the Iowa Horsemen's Benevolent and Protective Association. John is going to share insights into a bill that would prohibit rodeo bans in Iowa. John's rounding off our panel, and so take it away, John. The floor is all yours.
Brian, can you hear me well?
Perfect.
Excellent. New computer, my wife's used it and I had not, so I wasn't sure if it's going to work. So good deal. Right off the bat, I want to say thank you to the rest of the panelists that have been on here today. They've done an excellent job. Obviously, I have a little bit of connections with a few of the other panelists being HPPA members, and Lonnie working with the Florida Thoroughbred Breeders and Owners Association and running that organization. He does an excellent job down there. The topic that I'm going to discuss very briefly here, seeing as how short on time we are, is something it looks like Scott can actually speak to pretty well. Dorenkamp. It's about rodeos and the banning of those types of activities across the United States. I believe the most famous one currently is down in LA County. The city council passed an ordinance which effectively banned the use of rodeos. And I think there's also a couple of other states that have tried to implement them, various degrees of what can or can't occur regarding rodeo type activities and horse activities. So with those types of ordinances coming into place, and typically at this point in time, they've been more or less at a local municipality or local level in terms of their implementation. There's actually starting to get some kickback in relation to the actual states. So as we all know, Democrats, Republicans, the various groups that are part of these processes, Iowa is fairly conservative, has actually kind of went more to the right in recent years. And as such, some of the committees, specifically the Ag Committee here in the state of Iowa, has started taking notice of some of these local municipalities putting in their own ordinances, kind of banning these types of activities. So our Senate, we're a two-house, like 49 of the other states, we have two houses, the Senate and the House. And the Senate came up through their Agricultural Committee with effectively a statewide ban on local municipalities and cities and counties, or any type of local enterprise, effectively from banning what they call animal enterprises. Read quick definition here for you, just kind of bear with me. Animal enterprise means a commercial and academic enterprise that uses or sells animals or animal products for profit, food, or fiber production, agriculture, education, research, or testing. And it also includes, but is not limited to, zoos, aquariums, commercial establishments as defined under 62.2, furrier, circus, or persons licensed by the United States Department of Agriculture, or a domesticated animal event is defined in another section, or lawful competitive animal event. That's more or less where they kind of talk to me about the rodeos getting thrown into this activity. And then finally, any type of event intended to exhibit or advance agricultural arts or sciences. So again, it was kind of an interesting move by the state to try to capture not only, as it was presented to me originally, rodeos. They're trying to stop rodeo bans from coming into practice. But it feels as though this particular group of senators is really strong, feels strongly about not allowing for a whole bunch of different practices to be banned. Interesting side note, Iowa sometimes has gotten, while it's not directly horse related, it sometimes has been known as a puppy mill type of state. That's caused a lot of headache back and forth. And so when this bill was proposed, even though it's been proposed to the horses, the Horse Council, the Iowa HBPA, myself, and some of our supporters as an anti-rodeo ban, it also kind of incorporates these puppy mills, some of these other types of activities. And the groups that came for and against this kind of came out of the woodwork, as it were. Obviously, you had a lot of cities and municipalities that came out against it because they want control, their local control. That's a major issue. But you also came out with other groups, animal rights and animal welfare groups that came out against this because, again, they were supportive of these local groups trying to have control of what can and cannot occur within their areas. The bill is not passed. It died this session, but my understanding is that it will come back. So it's just kind of an interesting juxtaposed position here, in so much as what we just learned here recently with Colorado, where it's going to be a statewide scenario where they kind of clamp down very wholeheartedly on and through definition what can or can't occur, especially when you can't AI or do artificial insemination or embryo transfer or any other types of activities that, you know, the majority of the horse breeds have been participating in for years. Our state's actually started and begun to go in the exact opposite way in terms of trying to stop those types of local things from occurring and allowing it on a statewide level. I don't want to go much farther. I know we're short on time, but that is pretty much it in a nutshell. Keep that close and up to date, and I'll definitely get back to the committee if this bill actually gets a little bit farther along. So thank you very much, Brian.
Great, thank you, John. And it's definitely a unique tactic there to use a preemptive state bill moving forward. I'm wondering if that's something that other states or other groups might want to consider doing. Great, so we've moved through the panel, and we do have some follow-up questions for our group. I'm going to send off, my first question is for Lonnie Powell. And Lonnie, we know you've served as a CEO since 1990, and the legislative affairs has fallen under your watch as one of your many responsibilities. Can you share a little bit about your core strategies and some of your core philosophies you use in the government affairs space?
You bet, Brian. I first, not too long out of college, got put on the government affairs assignment. And at the time, I did not look at that as a positive as being one of my duties. It seemed like all it really entailed was handing out passes to the racetrack and getting a lot of dinners and lunches and those kinds of things. But then I saw the process evolve during my career. And I'd say in terms of some of the go-to things in my mind is advocacy is a year-round activity. It's a daily activity. So the way we try to approach it, and by the way, not everybody in the Florida horse industry does the same thing. I think that's why in this situation, we narrowly were the ones that were able to prevail, and a lot of our brother stakeholders were not. We do not go to our legislators just when we need something. We do not act burdened with time when we meet them. You get a chance to know them. You get a chance to know their other issues, their constituents, try to view things from not just our world, but from their world. And, you know, some of these people over the years, you end up going to their homes, you see them have children and grandchildren, and you can actually develop a relationship. Doesn't mean that everything's going to go your way by any stretch of the imagination, but I think it's an activity that you just don't stop. And you always must go after it. And even when you don't necessarily have something in play for your industry, you certainly have something in play for your community or for being a citizen or a resident. So I think you know, showing that we can think more broadly than just our own industry is helpful. I will tell you, this session with what we went through, I think the key things for us is we were looked upon as honest and credible brokers of information. And I think, gosh knows, I've been accused of showing passion, but I've learned to grow away from the fist to the table. But, you know, I think when you're spokesman at the microphone, especially during testimony or even during one-on-ones, if you don't have somebody that's from your industry and you're just letting the lobbyist do the job, that already shows that you're not as interested. And for me, I'm a lifer in this business. So I can talk about how it's put food on my table from the time I was brought home from the hospital and when I was a baby. And, you know, you got to have some passion, you got to have some knowledge and some skin in the game. And I guess that's the way I look at the approach. And I've learned it from a lot of great masters and mentors. I didn't come up with a lot of this myself, but it's kind of governs how I try to take government affairs on here at FTBOA and the places before me.
Great. Thank you, Lonnie.
Brian, while Lonnie's here, one of the questions in the chat that was directed to him was just for a clarification. Somebody said, did they hear you correctly say that barrel racing will no longer be in Florida in 12 months? So just
here's, and I saw my man John Moss. He was on the chat thing, and he gave a correct answer. And there's even a more precise answer. Please don't confuse any of this with non-parimutuel stuff. So all the normal barrel racing and all those kind of equine competitions, yeah, they're okay. It's just for parimutuel purposes. But we actually got rid of parimutuel barrel racing via lawsuit, my organization being one of those, so the HBPA being the other one, a number of years ago with the regulators. We saw it as a step towards decoupling, which obviously looks like we were correct, and that it lacked all integrity the way it was being conducted. Love barrel racing, love quarter horses, big part of my life as a kid, but not as a parimutuel sport when it was being used as a front for gaming. So, but barrel racing itself, quarter horse and all their pleasure and show and contest disciplines. And I don't know if there's anything standardbreds do in Florida outside of their racing, but if there were any non-racing things, they're still fine and well. It's just if it had to do with betting purposes, there's no barrel racing anymore, or no quarter horse racing, period.
thanks, Lonnie. Appreciate that.
Great. So we have another question up here for Gene. And Gene, I'm glad you talked about the Upper Peninsula issue. These trails disputes are something that occur all across the country. And you talked a lot about how organized the horse industry was. But if you could just share some of the other stakeholder groups that you think would be helpful for people in other states dealing with trails disputes moving forward, that'd be great. Who are some of these groups?
Well, of course, you have your local trails groups, and we all know the problems that trails face in many parts of the country. You also need to be aware of how zoning and land use issues in your own locality affects the way they treat trails and how many trails will be open for horses. Your state horse councils obviously are extremely important, and they usually have trails committees, which are also strategically important in that issue. It's hard for me to unwind trails from all of the other needed services and to the industry for people who want to use their horses on trails. And that means you've got to be able to keep horses where you are. You've got to be able to use them as you want to use them. And any organization that supports those goals are potential people that would support a trail issue.
All right, thank you, Gene. So to wrap things up, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time, we have room for discussion for one more question. And I believe we had something in the queue for Scott to talk a little bit more.
That's correct. So the question that the person asked was, how is slaughter defined in this proposal? Is it for food purposes? And would an owner euthanizing an injured cow or a horse that's under the age of 5 be at risk for prosecution? How do you interpret that, Scott?
Slaughter is not defined, but I'm assuming it's for food purposes. you can do regular animal husbandry practices as long as it is for the health and welfare of the animal. But the problem is who gets to define those things?
Thanks, Scott. I saw that someone had shared that Oregon is also experiencing a very similar piece of legislation out there in the chat.
That is- Yeah, Oregon's is Colorado's on steroids. It is completely, it is horrible. It's worse than this one. But somebody was asking me privately, I just wanted to add also, there is a concerted effort nationwide, because Colorado had this go through just a month ago, nationwide, to ban circuses. And we had to go in front of the state legislature and fight tooth and nail to have the language rodeos and county fairs included as exceptions. This is something that's going on nationwide, and everybody, I'm asking everybody, if you see something for anybody's certain or whatever their lane is, let somebody know, because we got caught with our pants down in LA, and we are fighting it right now. So please, if you know of anything, let someone know. Don't just sit on it.
Thanks, Scott. That's a great segue. So what we really wanted this panel to do was to sort of stimulate discussion. And I think that discussion is going to continue in our next session, which is at 1 o'clock Eastern time. And that's a discussion amongst the members of the Coalition of State Horse Councils. And their chair, Bill Scabby, has put the Zoom link into the chat box, so you can see that there. Also, the package you received from me on Friday contains the Zoom link if you want to go back to that email. So we really, really appreciate everything that the panel contributed in great conversation. And I encourage you to reach out to learn more about any of these things that were discussed. And I'm happy to provide contacts for any of the folks that were on this panel. Brian, do you have anything else you want to wrap up with?
No, thank you, Julie. I think one common theme here is that we all rely on grassroots, and I'll be reaching out to each of these panelists. They have some very good success stories and good issues that they're working on to talk more about drilling down at the grassroots level so that maybe we can help push forward a lot of the common issues we work for in Washington to translate that over to the federal level. That's it.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
HealthCar covers you from the uncertainty of expensive vehicle repairs, providing the same level of coverage offered through dealerships, but at a fraction of the price. With no long-term contracts, no mileage eligibility requirements, no credit checks, and no vehicle inspections, at the lowest price in the universe, guaranteed. You can get started with HealthCar immediately. So say goodbye to the hassle of overpriced repair bills and say hello to HealthCar. Enroll today